Okay, we're in siman lamed. We have a few more interesting sugyot. I'll just try to go through them quickly. Maybe we'll start with the tour. Okay, the Gemara says here, this is what the tour here quotes: "Kotvei sfarim v'tfilin u'mezuzot, הם ותגיריהם ותגירי תגיריהם וכל העוסקים במלאכת שמיים פטורים מקריאת שמע ומתפילה ותפילין ומכל המצוות." In other words, the people that are the writers of Sifrei Torah, Tefillin, and Mezuzot, but not only them, but them and their vendors and the vendors of their vendors. In other words, anybody that's engaged in the commerce of Sifrei Torah, Tefillin, and Mezuzot, they're all exempt from Kriyat Shema, Tefillah, Tefillin, u'mikol hamitzvot. Okay, and in the Gemara says that the reason for this is very famously because of Osek b'mitzvah patur min hamitzvah. Here, let me open it up. Famous Gemara in Masechet Sukkah. לקיים דברי רבי יוסי הגלילי, שהיה רבי יוסי הגלילי אומר, העוסק במצווה פטור ממצווה. So since they're in עוסק במצווה, either writing the ספרי תורה, תפילין ומזוזות, or selling them, as Rashi here says, הלוקחים מהם כדי למכור ולהמציאן לצריך להם, the buyers that buy and sell it to those people that need it to fulfill the mitzvah, they're all exempt. Okay, now there's a machloket here that the Ran here brings regarding this klal of osek b'mitzvah patur min mitzvah. What does it mean osek b'mitzvah patur min mitzvah? So there's a basic point which seemingly all the Rishonim agree on, that osek b'mitzvah doesn't mean that you're fulfilling the mitzvah, but you're actually engaged in the mitzvah. Okay, so for example, if it's a mitzvah that you're fulfilling passively, okay, now let's say for example I'm wearing tzitzit, okay, so am I fulfilling a mitzvah? Yes, but I'm not osek b'mitzvah because I'm not engaged in an action of a mitzvah. Or for example, we have in the Gemara that a shomer aveda, somebody who's watching over a lost item for somebody, he's considered osek b'mitzvah. But the Rishonim say, when is he osek b'mitzvah? Not when it's sitting in his home locked up, okay, when it's safe, because then even though he's fulfilling a mitzvah, he's not osek b'mitzvah. Osek b'mitzvah is only when you're actively engaged in a mitzvah. Now, so we say osek b'mitzvah patur min mitzvah. So what does that mean? So the Ran there brings, and that's what the Beit Yosef quotes, two explanations in the Rishonim. The Shita of Tosfot is that osek b'mitzvah patur min mitzvah. It's only if you can't fulfill one without fulfilling the other. In other words, if I'll stop this mitzvah to do this other mitzvah, then I won't be able to do this mitzvah. In other words, I have to choose between the two of them. So regarding that, we say osek b'mitzvah patur min mitzvah. Okay. So based on that, the Beit Yosef asks, how would they explain this business of kotvei sfarim tefillin mezuzot, that they're osek b'mitzvah patur min mitzvah? One, they should be able to stop, say kriyat shema, put on tefillin, and then go back to the writing. So the Beit Yosef here says, he says, כגון שאדם אחד רוצה לפרוש בים או בשיירה עכשיו ורוצה לקנות תפילין או תכלת ואי אפשר לו להמתין עד שהסופר או התגר יקיים מצווה. In other words, somebody's going off to some place, he has to buy a pair of tefillin now. If the sofer is not going to continue, if the sofer is going to stop from writing to do some other mitzvah, this guy is going to leave. His boat is leaving. So in that case, that it's one except on the other, in other words, what we call a mitzvah overet, regarding that, then they should stop. Then they should stop from doing the mitzvah. But however, in other words, in that case, they shouldn't stop from writing, okay, even though they won't put on tefillin, because then this other person will lose his mitzvah. But if the sofer stam can take a break from his writing, put on sacred yachma, put on tefillin, then why not? He should stop. However, then he quotes the Ran. The Ran holds that no, osek b'mitzvah patur min mitzvah means that if I'm engaged in one mitzvah, the Torah didn't require me to do another mitzvah. So therefore, even if I could fulfill both, but it requires me some sort of tircha, some sort of effort to try to do both. In other words, right now in the middle of writing, okay, you're asking me to stop, it's taking me away from the writing if I'll have now to go put on tefillin or say kriyat shema. So regarding that, the Torah didn't require you to be toreach, to go to the effort of fulfilling another mitzvah since you already engaged in one mitzvah. But if you can do both mitzvot without any torah at all, you're able to do them simultaneously, doesn't require any exertion of any effort from you, then even the Ran agrees that the exemption of Osek b'mitzvah patur min mitzvah would not apply. Okay, here the Beit Yosef brings another opinion that he claims that the Yerushalmi doesn't agree with this Bavli, and he says no, even Sofrei Stam, all that they're exempt from tefillin is just during the entire day, but they do have to stop at the very least to put on tefillin for Kriyat Shema and Tefillah. Okay, let's see what the Mechaber rules on this. So the Mechaber rule is like that final opinion that I said, which sort of seems to go against the Bavli, or is limiting the Bavli. Okay, and he says as follows: even though in other words, even Sofrei Stam are required to stop for Kriyat Shema and Tefillah and to put on tefillin because that's Kabbalat Torah Malchut Shamayim. They're only exempt from tefillin the rest of the day, and therefore for us, since we only put on tefillin during davening, there really is no nafkamina to Saracha. However, the Rama says, Hagam, ואם היו צריכים לעשות מלאכתן בשעת קריאת שמע ותפילה, אז פטורים מקריאת שמע ותפילין, תפילה ותפילין, וכל העוסק במצווה פטור ממצווה אחרת. Okay? So the Rama says, no, if they need to do it, even while during the time of davening, and they need to do their melacha at that time, then they are exempt even from קריאת שמע, תפילה and תפילין, they don't have to put on תפילין. אם צריך, וכל העוסק במצווה פטור ממצווה אחרת, because anybody who's עוסק במצווה is exempt from another מצווה, אם צריך לטרוח אחר אחרת. ואם יכול לעשות שתיהם כאחת בלא טורח, יעשה שתיהם. Okay, now there's a bit of a problem here that the Mishnah Berurah points out in the Lashon of the Rama, because the Rama starts off by saying, ואם היו צריכים לעשות מלאכתן בשעת קריאת שמע ותפילה, אז פטורים מקריאת שמע ותפילה ותפילין. In other words, and that sounds like the sheet of Tosfot, that because they need to do it now. Why do they need to do it now? Because there's some sort of urgency. Okay? But then he finishes off with the sheet of the Ran, that כל העוסק במצווה פטור ממצווה אחרת, אם צריך לטרוח אחר אחרת. In other words, even if I can do both, but it requires me some sort of tiyuch, I'm exempt from the other one. So according to that Ran, it seems like even if Stam, the Sofer got up in the morning, early in the morning, started writing before the time of davening came, he doesn't have to stop, even though he could stop and return to his work. He doesn't have to stop for that. Okay, so the Mishnah Berurah sort of here is in two minds on this. He says at the beginning it sounds like the Rama is holding like Tosfot, but from the end it sounds like the Ran, and therefore he says, really, according to the Ran, if you woke up and you haven't yet started writing, then you should first daven. But if somebody theoretically started writing before the time of davening came, then really he doesn't have to stop. Although the Maisa, I'm not hard to imagine any Sofer Stam that would do so. Again, according to the Mechaber, there is no such exemption, and you do have to stop for Kabbalat Malchut Shamayim and putting on tefillin. There is one more interesting point here, and this is a big discussion here in the Deir Halacha. I'll just say it briefly. That is as follows. We go back to the Gemara. Rashi said on Tagareihen, in other words, that's the people who are not even writing the Sofrei Stam. They're just buying from them to sell to the others. The Rashi here says that they're buying from the Sofrei Stam in order to sell it to somebody, those that need them. So the Magen Avraham wanted to learn out from Rashi here that Osek b'mitzvah patur min mitzvah is only if you're doing it l'shem mitzvah. In other words, if I'm buying it and selling it to get it to somebody who needs the tefillin, then I'm exempt because I'm doing it l'shem mitzvah. But let's say I'm selling tefillin not l'shem mitzvah, I'm selling tefillin because I want to make money. Okay? Then I don't have this tour of Osek b'mitzvah patur min mitzvah. Okay? The Deir Halacha, that's what the Magen Avraham, the Deir Halacha quotes from Magen Avraham. Magen Avraham finds this very difficult. I mean, what does it mean that you have kavana? People have kavana for multiple things. They have kavana l'shem mitzvah. They also have kavana to make money. It's not mutually exclusive. To me, the whole diuk from Rashi is very difficult because Rashi is not saying what's going on, why the person's doing it. He's just explaining what the mitzvah is involved. So if you're in the business of selling tefillin to those people who need it, then you're osek the mitzvah. It doesn't matter that why you're doing it. It could be that you're doing it l'shem shamayim. It could be that you're doing it because it's profitable. Could be both. Okay, so the Deir Halacha finds difficulty with this. He wants to say that at the very least, the sofer himself, who's writing, since he's mamish osek b'mitzvah, then for sure, even if he's doing it for Parnasa, and even that's mainly what he has in mind is Parnasa purposes, that would be considered Osik B'mitzvah. Again, to me, the whole thing is very difficult. If somebody's Osik B'mitzvah, how do you measure what his intent is? How much is it L'shem mitzvah? How much is it L'shem kabbalat star? It's very difficult.
Ravina, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
It's a similar. We had this case that we started to do a bris milah for a grown-up person about half an hour before Shkia to make sure that it has to be before Shkia. But for a grown-up, it's not, you know, just not a simple cut and is over in 10 minutes, but you have to, you know, the wound you have to sew together. So we were way past over Shkia, and I didn't daven mincha. But it seemed to be like oseh b'mitzvah patur min mitzvah. The question is, lefi the Rama, you could actually daven mincha until Tzeitzal Chaver, right? So what would you say in this case? You passed the time of Shkia. You were really oseh b'mitzvah because when you started you didn't know, but you had to do it because otherwise the time for the bris milah for the grown-up person would pass. What would you say?
No, first of all, you're right. I think that's a very good case of the mitzvah patur min mitzvah l'kuli alma, because you have to finish the bris by day. If you already started it, it's not like something that you can stop and continue. So I think l'kuli alma, that would be osik the mitzvah patur min mitzvah. Regarding the question of davening mincha after shkia, la'ani odaiti, you can't daven mincha after shkia. We wrote a tshuva on it in B'Mara Bazak a few years ago. Because the whole thing has to do. The whole shito that you can daven mincha after shkia are based on Tzeit HaKochavim of Rabbeinu Tam. It's the two machlokot are dependent one another. That's what trying to demonstrate. So the new dati, once shkia is over, just daven Maariv twice and.
Yeah, that's basically the answer that I got once when I was in Monsey. I was responsible for checking the Eruv every week. And especially in Monsey in like the winter, whatever, when the snow would fall and all the trees would bend from the weight of the snow, there was a lot of work sometimes. And I was told, if it means missing mincha, you miss mincha. But the Eruv is more important.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good example. Right. We had once a get that we had somebody who came into the Beis Din in the afternoon, and he said, "Today I'm giving a get." And after we thought he was joking, but after we spoke to him a bit, we realized that either he was giving the get today or he may never, who knows when he'll give the get. So we realized it was urgent, and we got somehow a sofer to come in and aid him and everything. Baruch Hashem, we finished, I think 5 minutes before Shkia, so we were able to daven quickly mincha, but that would probably have also qualified a osik b'mitzvah, I think, in that case, for sure. All right, let's keep going. Go in the Shulchan Aruch. Hamitztair, here seif tet, says the Mechaber, hamitztair הוא מי שאין דעתו מיושבת עליו ונכונה פטור, מפני שאסור להסיח דעתו מהם. Okay, the source for this halacha is not so clear in the Gemara. The one who says it is the Rambam. It's not so clear. The Mefarshim debate where exactly the Rambam learned it out from. But according to the Rambam, basically this is what the Mechaber paskins, is that somebody who is in pain, in some sort of pain, could be physical, could be emotional, and therefore he's not able to focus. In other words, he's preoccupied with his tsar. Then he's patur from that tefillin. Why? Because it's asur la'asiach daito mehim. Here the Mishnah Berurah says, that's only if it's so strong that he's unable to focus. But if he is able to get himself his thoughts in order, at least for a little bit, then he should put on tefillin. I saw here in the Orach Chaim, he says something very interesting. We'll see this later on, I think in siman Memdaled, but there's a machloket rishonim. What does it mean she'asur la'asiach dat min tefillin? According to the Rambam, Surah Siach Dat Min Tefillin means that you really have to, when you have tefillin on, you have to have always in mind the tefillin. You can't be elsewhere. According to other Rishonim, Surah Siach Dat Min Tefillin just comes to exclude Kalut Rosh. In other words, if you'll behave in I don't know how you call it, in a jesting, joking type matter of lightheadedness. So the Orach Chaim wants to say that this halacha that mitzvah is exempt is only the Rambam l'shitato, that any form of hesech hadat in tefillin is prohibited. But according to the Rishonim, that hesech hadat that's really aser mi'ikar adin is only kalut rosh, lightheadedness, then it wouldn't exempt if somebody who's just mitzvah, even though he's not so focused, but nevertheless, it's not that he has a lack of seriousness. So therefore, he would be chayv to put on tefillin, and he says something there. He has an expression there. Lo shamanu me'olam. Somebody who didn't put on tefillin, just because he's mitzvah. So that's the Orach Chaim at least on this. Seif Yud, הקורא בתורה פטור מהנחת תפילין כל היום זולת בשעת קריאת שמע ותפילה. Okay, this is also something very interesting. This was actually already a machloket in the Gaonim. Here the Tur brings it. He says, גרסינו למחילתא לזיכרון בין עיניך. מכאן אמרו המניח תפילין כקורא בתורה והקורא בתורה פטור מן התפילין. So this mechilta seems to say that somebody who's learning Torah is exempt from tefillin. But he quotes here, "V'chatav Rav Shmuel bar Chofni, one of the Geonim, leita lehach b'raita darabanan kshishai v'toratan umanotan menichin tefillin umaverchim alayu v'ilav dechovai lo maverchin alayu." So Rav Shmuel bar Chofni wanted to say that this mechilta is not lehalacha because he says we saw a great Talmidei Chachamim that even though they were learning Torah, they still put on tefillin. They made a bracha on tefillin. So it must be that it was obligatory. Okay, the proof here is not so clear because some say, so what? Who said, even if they didn't have to put on tefillin, if they decided to put on tefillin, they're mekayim the mitzvah, should they say the bracha? Okay. Now he quotes another opinion. He says, in other words, Ba'al Yitur wants to say it's only if you're reading Torah shebichtav that you're exempt from tefillin, but not Torah sheba'al peh. The Torah says, this is what's the difference if you're learning Torah shebichtav, Torah sheba'al peh, it's both limud Torah. Okay, basically, both Yosef here brings a long discussion on it. He says, some wanted to say that again, Koreh b'Torah, that they're exempt, it's only that they don't have to put on tefillin the entire day, but b'sha'at kriyat shema v'tfilah, which is Kabbalat or Orach Chaim, they do. And that's what he rules here, the Koreh b'Torah, פטור מהנחת תפילין כל היום זולת בשעת קריאת שמע ותפילה that they're chayav. Here in the Mishnah Berurah, he brings also an opinion of the Gra that says הגר"א פסק בביאורו דווקא מי שתורתו אומנותו כגון רשב"י וחבריו, אבל כגון אנו צריכים להפסיק בתפילין. Suddenly somebody was at the Madrega of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai that never stopped from learning Torah, that would be exempt from tefillin. Again, this is not so much of nafkamina for us because anyway we're only putting on tefillin in Zman Kriyat Shema v'Tfilah, and anyway that according to the rule of Mechaber there's no exemption from that. Seif Yud is also very interesting. לא יחלוץ תפילין בפני רבו אלא יפנה לצד אחר מפני אימתו ויחלוץ שלא בפניו. You should not take off tefillin in front of your Rav. Why not? Why is this a problem? So this is something very interesting. The source for this in the Gemara is in Masechet Sanhedrin. This is a Gemara on Yeravam. Yeravam, very famously, he was the one that after Shlomo HaMelech, when Shlomo's son Rechavam took over, Yeravam founded the Mamlechet Israel, the kingdom of Israel. That was the punishment to Shlomo for his sins, that his son would lose the sovereignty over all of Israel, and that Yehuda and Israel will be separated. So it says on Yeravam, "Zeh hadavar asher hirim yad b'melech Shlomo." And the Gemara asks, what does it mean asher hirim yad b'melech? He lifted his hand. So the Gemara says, "Amar Rav Nachman shechalatz tefillin befanav." He took off tefillin in front of Shlomo HaMelech. And there's another also, Shimush Rabbah, again, the source in the Gaonim, which quotes the Amoraim of saying that it's prohibited for somebody to take off tefillin in front of his Rav. Again, so we see that when you take off tefillin in front of somebody, it's somehow some sort of sign of disrespect. The question is why? Well, what's the problem? I took off the tefillin, so what's the issue? So So Rashi here brings several explanations. He says, שחלץ תפילין בפניו, שהיה לו לפנות לצד אחר מפני אימת מלכותו ולחלוץ שלא בפניו. In other words, you don't have, it's not that you always have to have tefillin on, but the act of taking off the tefillin, that you should have stepped to the side to do. Okay? And he says, חולץ תפילין אין נכון להיות בגילוי ראש לפני המלך. In other words, when you take off tefillin, your head is uncovered, because I guess you have to lift up your hat or something to take off the tefillin. So you're exposing your head, and that's why it's considered a sign of disrespect, and you shouldn't do it in front of your Rav. Okay, there are a whole bunch of other explanations here on what does this business of chalatz tefillin befanav mean. Beit Yosef here quotes several interesting opinions. Says that some say it's only if you're taking off close to Shkia, because you're sort of demonstrating that now is the time to take off tefillin, and it's sort of like you're more halacha in front of your Rav. Okay, some very interesting discussions on this. Anyway, the Maaseh, the Mechaber here says, "Lo yachlotz tefillin b'fnei rabo, lifnei letzad acher mipnei mato v'yachlotz shelo b'fanav." You shouldn't take off tefillin in front of your Rav. You should go to the side and do it over there. Here the Mishnah Berurah says it only applies Hainu Rabo Muvhak Derov Chuchmato Amen. Okay. Here he says that if you're careful not to expose your head when you're taking off tefillin, then it's not a problem. The whole problem is just because of Gilui Rosh, like Rasi said. It also wouldn't apply to tefillin shel yad based on this, because again you're not exposing your head, so it's not a sign of disrespect. Interesting point here in the Beit Yosef that he quotes, the two rather, that also he rejects. He says, "Amar Rava lo kasher lanuchi tefillin ela leman dekari Torah nevi'im ve'ktuvim." In other words, there's this thing in the Shimush Rabbah that says that only somebody who is learned, who has studied Tanakh, only he can put on tefillin. Here the Beit Yosef quotes the Rosh and other Rishonim reject this. They say, no, everybody's tired to put on tefillin. There's no such requirement. Obviously, there is a chiyuv to learn Torah, but it's not me'aked. Even if somebody who's not learned is still allowed to put on tefillin. Shimush Rabbah, again, is some sort of work from the times of the Gaonim. The Rosh quotes it in Menachot at the end of his Hilchot Tefillin, and the Rishonim were in two minds about it. In other words, some of the things that appear in the Shimush Rabbah they accepted, but some of the things there, as I think we've seen a number of times during Hilchot Tefillin, some of the things in the Shimush Rabbah they didn't like so much. So this was one of them, about that only somebody who's learned can wear tefillin. So that's one that they rejected.
I mean, what's the logic behind it? I mean, you have mitzvah d'oraisa, and you can only fulfill if you learned. I mean, it's like you can only keep Shabbos or whatever, or I don't know what, if you learned it.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, that's the pashtus, like you're saying. It could be that opinion thought that, you know, tefillin is such a significant kedusha that you're tying it to your body and your head. You have to be worthy of that. It's not that anybody can do it. Okay, even there, the requirement wasn't so large. It was one pasuk from Torah, one pasuk from Nevi'im, and one pasuk from Tuvim. So it's not a tremendous amount to learn, but still something. Yeah, it's strange though, I agree. Okay, let's see quickly the last two seifim. This is something we saw back, I think, in Hilchot Seif, in Hilchot Mezuzah as well. Seif Yudbet, היה צריך לתפילין ומזוזה ואין ידו משגת. לקנות שניהם תפילין קודמים. If you can't afford both a mezuzah and tefillin, then tefillin is first. This is actually a machloket in the Yerushalmi. The reason the Rishonim rule that tefillin is first is for two reasons. First of all, tefillin is a mitzvah begufo, it's on your body. And also, tefillin is considered to have a higher kedusha than mezuzah. Again, the Mishnah Berurah here says, though, that if you're able to borrow tefillin on a daily basis, you know, consistently, then you should buy a mezuzah and then borrow tefillin. Finally, Yud Gimel menudeh umetzora asurim laniach tefillin. Somebody who's in cherem or somebody who's metzora, who is leprosy, they're prohibited from putting on tefillin. This is actually a suffix in the Gemara in Moed Katan, and what's very strange here is that even though here the Mechaber rules that they're asur laniach tefillin, in Yoredea in the halachot of Nidui, he rules that one is chayiv to put on tefillin, and that's what the Mishnah here Gura actually paskins, that the Achronim say that somebody who's medude or metzora should put on tefillin. The reason to say they don't have to put on tefillin is because it's considered a bit they're like in the velut, but the Maisa there, the Psakin Yoreh has most Rishonim that they do have to put on tefillin. Okay, not so common nowadays. We don't have that many. We don't, at least in our communities, we don't have people put in nidui. Although I do know of one Rav who got so upset at one of his balabatim that he did put him in nidui. Although I don't know if it was actually observed by the community members. And Metzora, there's an interesting discussion amongst the poskim nowadays. Do we have tzarat nowadays? But I saw at least some poskim that write that even though we clearly have a lot of diseases nowadays, we don't have anybody who's actually halachically considered a metzora. That's another interesting discussion. The drasha in our shul of Rav Elisha Aviner was all about that the last week. Is there tzarat nowadays or not? But I think it's continuing also, so there isn't. All right, any questions or comments? Okay, shkoyach everyone. So we'll continue next week with next siman.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Regarding Tzarat, I had a